going to do an overview of week 4, which is next week. And there's 2 themes that are going to be covered next week, K to 5. And what I'm going to show you is an overview of what Melvin had, but not necessarily what the grade levels are going to do. Theirs may look slightly different based on developmental need. I am filming. But you can't be seen, don't worry. Okay, so the first theme that they're going to work on is early word building. And there's some important terminology that's introduced next week. It's been glossed over a little bit in some grades, but next week it really gets some definitive teaching. And it's the terms morphology, which is the study of how words are built, prefix, base, and suffix. These words all get taught next week, and the kids have access to try to work with words and build words. This is a pre-K theme, and so Melvin's system here is it's primarily oral, but once I did this theme myself and sort of worked through it, there's so many opportunities to extend this theme in ways that would really help kids. So although this would be oral, this is what I would probably do with it at the lower grades, or potentially with kids at the higher grades that just needed more work. Melvin introduces the theme and starts talking about how words are built, beginning with a base, and then he slowly adds on prefixes and suffixes and shows those things. He connects it to meaning and asks kids if they can think of other words. So for example, the word open, somebody may say, well, we could reopen that. And he would help them through the theme understand that re is a prefix. Okay? This is also where this chart is going to come in handy and probably get the first kickoff in classrooms, unless people have already done it, which is fine. But this is where we really want it to happen. And you can see up here, this list here I could use with the re suffix and have kids read these words with me, or we could orally generate them. Then I could tell them that re is a prefix, and I could put it on my chart and start to build this chart. Okay? The sticky notes is a good idea, and I'd forgotten about that, and had actually put mine on little cards and thumbtacked them in, and it's crazy. Sticky notes are great because you can pull it off and manipulate it as well. Okay, so you'll see here that he does prefixes, and he really states that you want to work with prefixes first and have students understand. He does a tactile move as well, where the base is your fist, and you add a prefix or a suffix using your fist. I spoke to some early grade teachers in Beijing who were using socks with Velcro, and they were Velcroing a base on and then holding up a prefix or a suffix and really giving that some tactile stuff for the young learners. I don't think in the upper grades that would be as necessary, but I do think giving them a chance to say these words with the prefix or with the base does make sense. So his idea is that you get the prefixes fairly solid, so this may be 1 day on prefixes before you move into suffixes. Okay? The other thing is that prefixes often do have meaning, and the way that he says it, which I think is really smart because they don't always mean that, but he will say this is the prefix re, which usually means to do again or again. He has that usually in all of his write-ups. He's not saying it means, so that there's an out there. I tried to look up the meaning of suffixes, and it just doesn't work very well, so I didn't write it down there, but on some of these, for my own information, I wrote the meaning on them. You could always write it on the back, I think.
One question is, and I can't remember now, but I thought that instead of like saying re, he would always spell it. You know, the prefix re is. I would rather get started with the right. Or if you remember, or we should.
You know, I think it's something to ask. I can see you say the prefix re, which means again, but then I need to know how to pronounce it when I'm putting it on these words. So that's a question I have. For now, I think it's one we'll ask Pete. But I think you're right. We are trying to do spelling. But this isn't really a spelling as much as this is oral word building at this point. So let's ask him and double check. Okay, so I've sort of put up all the little pieces that I would have used on this to talk to kids about how to connect and start to build words. The other thing that he talks about is fix. And he literally says that a prefix is fixed to a word, and that's why they're called that. And a suffix is fixed or adhered to the end of the word. It's another little way to help them remember that terminology. Right, Emily?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just you're fixing a word, so you're changing it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much this first theme. I did a lot of work here, but that was the level I had to do to get into it. But like I said, I think there's so many things that you could do, and after you do it, you can pull these down and build up your suffix and prefix chart. These are the ones that are mentioned in the theme. Of course, as you come to them, like pre isn't mentioned, but I'm putting it up here, you can put it on. As well as if kids think something's a suffix or a prefix, you can put it on and do a test on it that day or later. One of the easiest ways to do it is to look it up in the dictionary with the line, and it'll tell you if it's a suffix or a prefix. Yeah.
And is this theme across the grade levels? So when first grade's working on early word building, so is fifth grade?
Yep.
Okay.
For this year, so that we can grow into the work, yeah. It may look very different, of course, based on their developmental needs. It may be very oral in first grade, whereas fifth grade might do a lot more written. But, okay? So then the other thing that they're teaching this week is on etymology, early etymology. So we talked about morphology, which is the building of words, and then we move into etymology, which is seeing how words are connected. And this theme specifically talks about connections through meaning, which I know you did a little bit this week with the TW and all that, but this goes even further into that. One of the things that we're going to have to unlearn ourselves, and even for some of our kids, because I know Nagita found this in her third grade class, is the idea of what a word family is now. Word families in this framework are not connected by rhyme. They're not connected by pronunciation or structure. They're connected by meaning. So the at word family, hat, bat, stat, rat, is not a word family from what we're talking about. So we're going to try to move ourselves away from calling that a family. We might want to call it a rhyming set or words that rhyme, something like that. But a family of words now is connected by meaning. So this is one example, and I'm putting a house around it. Another little way just to remind kids that families are connected, have a historical connection. And that's how he explains it. It's like ancestry. You're connected through generations, and these are connected through usage across the years. So the one that he studies, the one, is the word one. And through this theme, he brings that out to kids. One of the other important elements of this is that you never take a word in isolation, but you always look at its relatives. Some people may have already used this chart here where they start with what does it mean, how is it built. This is the one that this one focuses on to me, is it starts kids saying, well, what other words can I think of that are related in meaning, make a family, that are connected in meaning? There are two ways that you can represent families, and he shows you this in the pre-theme. I don't know if it's taught to kids, but you can do both or one or the other. The first is a word web, where the words that are connected in meaning, the family of long, is drawn out like this, and then you can add the words that go with them like this. The other way is something called a matrix, or matrices, is the plural. And these get much more complex, and we're going to learn how to use them in more complexity later, but for right now, they're fairly simple, and they're read left to right. So this would be a long, or longer, longest. So you can generate words from these matrices. These are great for kids also to start building, and even if they don't, one of the best things about them is our goal is not necessarily to build them accurately, but to build them and try and revise and change based on what we start to understand about words. Okay? So what he does is he gives us this information, and then he starts the theme by investigating the word one and trying to find a family based on meaning for one. And he looks at these words here: alone, lone, none, and atonement. Atone, of course, is a word that first graders may or may not need to know, but for your information, it's valuable. So he starts with, the first bit that he does is alone, and how lone and alone are two separate but related words, but separate words. They're not connected over here, and it's because a long time ago, and this is the kind of stuff that kids glom onto, and it's suddenly in their long-term memory and not just something memorized. But a long time ago, AL in Old English was a prefix, and you can find it still in words like although, also, almost, and always, but it started to be confused with the prefix A. So people thought that alone was the A prefix because lone made sense by itself to them. And so lone sort of glopped off and became its own word, whereas it wouldn't work with these words, so or something like that. So that's what he says happened. That's why you'll see both. And then from lone, all of these words could be built from that. Okay? And of course, you know why these are connected in meaning, right? when he gets to the word only, he was saying that this one should be spelled O-N-E-L-Y. But over time, the E dropped out of usage. And he can trace it back to about the 1800s, and we came up with this present-day spelling. But it's still connected in meaning. So this, again, is not connection in structure, but connection in meaning, because when you're only, you're usually by yourself, or just one. Okay, so this is also going to be fascinating to kids to connect it back. And atonement is the prefix at, one is the base, and ment is the suffix. And he says this came from a word, one-ment, which meant to be reconciled. So to go back with one. And atonement came from that. So fascinating little deals to get them to think about the word one. I think that's it from this theme. There's a lot in this next week that you can do, I think, and a lot of different ways to go off, even if you're just working with prefix and suffix building, and starting to get kids to find and locate prefixes and do a test back. If you take off the prefix, what are you left with? That's always the test.